Great to have everyone today, and Pam and Erica, and we're having a fabulous discussion on the tilt pattern of clarity. And we just started this morning and or afternoon and talking about it and had ourselves in fits and giggles about the many things that we want to say about this clarity. So this is going to be a rich session, I'm absolutely sure. So ladies, what is your impression about these about this tilt pattern?
Well, Erica, I'm going to start and say that the clarity pattern, or somebody who is residing in the clarity pattern, is the person that everyone loves. They absolutely are the most kind and harmonious and patient, loving, person that also has a huge amount of information in their head. So that's why we call them the quiet genius. And they will go to their grave with your secret. They're so trustworthy. And this is why everyone goes to them for their perspective and their judgment, and also goes to them for reassurance and comfort. So it's no wonder they are so loved.
I definitely agree with everything you said. And I would add, they're also the ones you rely on to make sure everything is taken care of, right? They're the ones you do perfect travel preparation. They think about every, detail to think about, to pack everything, what could happen there. At work, the ones to make sure there's no mistakes. They're really careful to make sure everything is done perfectly. And there are normally also the subject matter experts are really good in their particular area and really know, everything about it.
Yeah, so
I
some of what
agree.
I'm hearing is that it's shared with the structure tilt too, right? So they're very detailed with the data and the knowledge and the history. And I love what you said, Erica. We're getting ready to go on a trip ourselves in June. And of course, we have the maps, we have the trails, we have all the, excursions, and Dan is the one who knows, which flight and what airline and where we're going and where's the ferry and all of those things. And I'm, of course, not the clarity pattern. So I'm like happy to go along with, trusting his judgment about all those things and his attention to detail and process and organizing, just like the structure tilt. So they share that wisdom quadrant in that way. But what's different from structure, of course, is the humanity part. So they're so focused on harmony and alignment and all of us getting along, and no anger and no fuss and no drama, that they sometimes can do that at their own expense, and really favor us all getting along at the expense of their own voice.
Well, this is obviously one of my favorite topics because I live with a clarity, as I know you do too, Pam. And in the middle of moving at this point, he has packed every box and labeled it beautifully. And my curiosity for both of you is then what happens, for example, if you question a clarity because you simply want to know maybe where something is or why something was done that way, and the response is quite defensive. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say there could be even a little outburst, that happens, like the defensiveness, but it goes away very quickly and then we're back in harmony. So I'm wondering if, you two would agree with that. But yeah, the defensive nature is about feeling powerless. So it's about like everybody else seems to have more power than I do. I'm always the one who's studious and taking care of everything. So I don't have time, to be that proactive person that's making the big decisions. And in fact, they don't necessarily want to. This is the person that might not want a promotion actually, because of all the headaches that they see that people in these authority positions have, and them not wanting that kind of responsibility on their own shoulders. But they're so wonderful at being supportive of that person. So they often will seek to work in roles with, people that will go take risks, that will go, do big things, and they will make themselves, very useful and supportive to that person or that entity or that company.
Also to add, I think it's also about credibility, right? So if you point something out that didn't do as well, they're questioned very quickly, am I good enough? Am I really seen as credible? It's so important to them. So it quickly goes back to, not believing in themselves, low self-esteem perhaps, and so they actually harm themselves more than others. I think some other, patterns it's more about, you hurt relationships, you hurt, connections with people. They actually hurt themselves more by questioning themselves so much and then retreating and then feeling like a victim. And, why is not anybody seeing what I'm doing here for them? I just want to do everything, well for people.
Yes, the internal thinking sometimes means that they're so quiet they might be overlooked in meetings, and they're not the ones that are doing all the talking very often, unless it's their subject matter expertise and they have an opinion. When they do, they will, come forward with it. But yeah, the defensiveness Carol brought up, I think, is an interesting thing that'll happen. It is quick, and it will kind of fade out quickly because harmony is what they want. But they can feel backed in a corner and can feel like that feeling of powerlessness, or that I'm not seen. Nobody sees me, and you guys didn't hear me. I tried to tell you too. A little martyr can come out sometimes. Like, I tried to tell you, but you just weren't listening. All of you were talking. So there can be some blaming, and they're not so negative that they would go gossip as much, but because they're very trustworthy and they care a lot about people, and they're very respectful and offer everyone the dignity and kindness that they deserve, and even sometimes people who don't deserve it, right? But they want other people often to take the lead. There's another pattern we were chatting about earlier, which is the reactive versus proactive. Carol, what are your thoughts on that one?
Yes, we did talk about that quite a bit. What I've noticed is, because clarity really keeps their head to the ground, and again, harmony is of utmost importance, they have a tendency to be perceived as being reactive as opposed to being proactive. And I've heard that many times with some clients, where their reviews, for example, are consistent. They're consistently good manager, consistently good with people, and consistently reactive rather than being proactive. And some of their supervisors or superiors have encouraged them to be more proactive, which is kind of fascinating.
I think that goes to their patience. They're very patient. Erica, what were you going to say?
No, it's great. Yeah, it's great. But it also, I think it links what you said before. They like to be more a follower, right? They're not out there to take a risk and take the lead. It could be, it could not be perfect. It couldn't be well done. So again, that goes back to them not feeling self-confident enough that they're doing a good job. So they'd rather wait and see, and somebody else take the lead and take the risk.
Yeah, I always bring up the Dunning-Kruger effect in this contrast between clarity and impact. I always say impact doesn't know how much they don't know. And so they're confident because they don't know enough, and often, right? And then clarity knows how much there is to know. They know there's a lot of deep information, and the more they dig in, the more they find out there is to know. And so because they're those good researchers and so thorough and prepared, it often has a negative effect on their confidence level. So there can be some imposter syndrome there, that, I should be more confident, but I know what it's like out there. There's so many different ways this could go wrong. They're wonderful troubleshooters because they can see the 17 different ways that this decision is going to come back on us in some negative way. So that causes sometimes some paralysis analysis, and, like, I can't move forward, and, so procrastinating even, because to avoid that risk.
Very clear discussion, ladies, or lots of clarity, no pun intended, on what we can expect from our coachees. My curiosity now for both of you is, what is it like? What do we need to watch? What's our mindset when we are clarity coaching the other tilt patterns? What are your thoughts?
I'm just thinking now because I'm not clarity, right? So this is hard for me to put in now. But if if as a coach, if you're more clarity, right, you probably also try to please, you have the need to please the other person more and, be seen as somebody helpful and good. So we might attend more stepping into that helper role. I'm guiding you versus really a partnership where the other person is taking us even more the lead. So that could be one. And we might need more information, more clarity on the story and everything before we are ready to move along as well.
Yes, and having supervised a lot of clarity coaches over the years, there can be sometimes a little like moment where you feel like you're losing your client, and then you get worried, and that's when they call me and say, I'm not sure my client is really valuing the process. And so there's, sometimes a reassurance that is required. But also it's, staying too much in the, I'm going to do your job for you. As you said, Erica, like they'll also provide a lot of information to their client, which really isn't our job. So I think that's a temptation that you could you have all these resources as the quiet genius. And sometimes when I'm supervising a clarity coach, I'll ask them, how things are going, and they'll show me some of the things they've shared with their client. And I'm like, whoa, like you're doing the work for them. Like you're giving them all this information and doing all these little spreadsheets for them and so forth. And I think that is probably not appropriate, especially in laser coaching. Where you're in the support role to your client. They're going to love it, but it isn't really the role that we are in. So that's the temptation, I think, is one of them.
I think I would also add that I would sense a reticence to use direct communication. That might be, we might hang back if we were a clarity coach and maybe be just a little bit hesitant to try direct communication, or maybe soften the message so much that it no longer is a direct question.
Absolutely, and want that harmony with your client, so not be willing to be asked those provocative questions that might get the shift, and evoke awareness in your client, because then you'd be afraid you might offend them, or that they wouldn't like you.
Or even let them sit in discomfort, which
Yes.
might be very difficult for clarity as well. Yeah, allow your client to sit in discomfort.
Yes, or wanting to hear too much of the story could also be a temptation, I think. When I reside in clarity as a coach, I will spend too much time on the beginning and listening in a very clarity way, and then remember, oh, I gotta get them, up over here in resilience and courage. And I spent 5 or 6 years studying clarity myself and kind of resided there. So I think that was one of the things that I did when I was tilting clarity.
Rich discussion, ladies. Anything else either one of you wants to say in order to close out today?
Just, it would be interesting to, as a close, to think about, so what does it mean to coach somebody that is clarity? So what's the other side like for us as coaches? What might be the challenges?
Yeah, I have one right now that I think what keeps coming into the sessions is too much information. So they come in with the story, and it goes on and has all these different tendrils to it. So it ends up being too much information for me as the coach. And then there's also the insecurity. They kind of get themselves confused by so much of that. Where were we, kind of thing. And so it's, getting them to narrow down the topic of the day, not go off on informational tangents or stories that come from the humanity side, is one of the things that I notice. But a lot of times it's the imposter syndrome. It's, I'm not quite confident enough to have an impact. And so, you know, resentment that they don't have an impact and their voice is not heard, they're not seen, not happy about that. Authority figures are bad. They can tend to villainize authority figures, the company, the man, the whatever, and you know, feel and kind of represent I'm at the effect of them, and I'm powerless to do anything about it.
I think it could also be right because they are trying to preserve stuff and not so risk taking to try out new things, right? They might stop, like they might intellectualize a lot in discussion, but when it's time to move on, try something new and different, they're hesitant because they fear, right? How do I come across? What does that mean to me and my credibility as well?
And definitely the defensiveness that Carol brought up, you know, like, whoa, you know, I'm good. You know, I know a lot, that kind of thing. Yeah, don't question
I
me.
think another small nuance to that would also be just the speed at which they would process. So we would want as coaches to give them some time to really process. So it might not be unusual for them to go and do some of that processing between coaching sessions as opposed to in that very moment. And we as coaches want to be aware that they may just take a little bit more time to come to the right conclusions for themselves.
That's such a good point, Carol. I'm so glad you brought that up because I think it is a very important one that a clarity person is going to be a great teacher. And because they're the great teacher, they see all the things that they need to study and know and et cetera. But in the moment, in a learning situation or a new situation or a coaching situation, they might feel overwhelmed with all there is that in their mind and their perception that there is to learn in order to affect change. So giving them more time and being patient with the process and letting them sleep on it and encouraging them that it's okay for them to take that time is really important.
Indeed. Great discussion, ladies. Thank you very much.